I'm okay. I'm okay.
Then get out, quick. Shit!
Go with me, you chicken shit!
Show you.
Get off of
Show
me!
you.
Environmental and game level design can be powerful narrative and immersion tools in game design. Today we'll explore these concepts. We'll answer questions like what is environmental design, what is level design, and how do they differ from each other, as well as look at real examples of these concepts in action and see how do they affect the storytelling and level of immersion that we experience in video games. So hopefully, as gamers, we will develop a new appreciation to these crucial yet often underappreciated aspects of game making. These topics are complex and huge, and there is no way I can do them justice in one video. So it's best to think of this video as an introduction to these concepts, and I'll try to keep everything as simple and as clear and concise as possible. So grab a large cup of coffee, get comfortable, and strap in, because we have a lot of ground to cover. So what is environmental design? Environmental design is the design of game worlds as settings. Think of design in terms of the architecture of the world, the nature, and even the visual themes of the world or the location you're in. This can be a very difficult and an intense creative endeavor from an environmental artist's point of view. Games can take place in fantastical or sci-fi centric locales, so artists have to think of the aesthetic visuals of how these places look. But not only that, it can get as detailed as how these environments came to be in the first place, and we'll see in a bit why this is actually really important. So if a specific part of a game was on a spacecraft, artists would have to think of things like what sort of technologies do these spaceships have? What sort of objects might exist inside of it? How does it function? And speaking of functionality, is it even practical or logical for a spaceship to have this type of design over another? It can get as detailed as are there enough bathrooms, and how do the bathrooms work and look like in this universe? You see where I'm going at with this. Even in a realistic setting, you might still have locations and situations that don't exist, or as an artist you might not be familiar with. So there's a lot of research that goes into understanding these environments and how to simulate them. A great example of this would be Horizon Zero Dawn. You can see, for example, in their concept work, how the artist took this normal realistic setting and actually transformed it into ruins over several iterations. You can almost see it decaying in a sense, and this affects the general feel of all the ruins in the game, in this sort of grounded reality way. It makes sense that these ruins came to be. This feels like something you might see or experience in real life. On the other hand, artists had to design these huts or living quarters for the Osram tribe, and you can see how the artists explain their designs of how some of these structures could be built using the technologies of the universe and how they behave when they catch fire. And even though this tribe is fictional, it still makes sense that these woodsmen would have this type of architecture style. It is not unimaginable to see such a location in real life. And even as the game ventures more into the realm of fantasy, you have the bandits, for example, and you can see their homes, these chaotic tents decorated by loot and blood, and they do reflect their violent and chaotic nature. Now, dare I squeeze one more example from Horizon? Let's look at Meridian, the Sun City. The Sun City is built on this mountainside, and it features these two huge elevators that take you up the mountain and into the city, and it's quite the sight to behold. It's grand, it's jaw-dropping when you first see it, but it's still plausible, you know? It does explain how they might traverse up and down the mountain quickly. This might be how they transport their goods, for example. And everything about Meridian complements the Sun City theme. The architectural design features these large Middle Eastern Persian-style windows that I imagine allow for the maximum amount of interior illumination through sunlight during the day, or the color palettes of the city being dominated by orange and red, all the way to the outfits. You can see how the Emperor and the Clerk outfits represent the light of the sun. Everything complements the sun-city theme. Right, so that was a quick but chunky intro into environmental design. Well done for reaching it. Proud of you. But we're not done yet, so grab a refill and get ready for exploring what level design is. So you're probably feeling quite confident now about environmental game design, but still wondering what in the world is level design? Well, not to worry, because I think level design is a much easier concept to explain. See, I think of level design as the technical aspect of a game environment from a gameplay point of view. Think of things like enemy placement inside the environment, or where the weapons are, where the obstacles that the player face are, things like puzzles or platforming sections, or even checkpoints. I like to think of it from a top view map-like point of view. Take Resident Evil 2 Remake for example. Once the designers have the general game space set up, they might start thinking about which areas to allow the players to access first. Maybe confine the player to the main hall and then move him into the east corridor, then maybe have a puzzle in the press room that will give the player this key that then opens up the west office that has 3 zombies in it, reimplant, and 10 handgun ammo, and so on and so forth. But it's not necessarily the case that level design comes after creating the environment. It could actually inform the environment creation process. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on level design because it's really a massive subject, and maybe I'll make a video in the future that delves deeper into level design. However, I felt it's important that you distinguish between it and environmental design. So naturally, at this point, you might be wondering, well, what significance do level and environmental design hold over video games? Well, these two concepts have been found to have a huge impact on games in a variety of ways, but we will look at one very important way that having coherent and really well thought out environmental and level design can impact the gameplay experience, and that is from a psychological point of view. Having a logical, detailed, and deep world has a significant importance in creating convincing and immersive virtual environments for players to explore. In fact, consistent and cohesive environmental design can lead to a state of total immersion in a video game. This is what researchers call spatial presence. Now, what spatial presence is that when you actually feel like you're inside the video game. You forget the TV, you forget the controller in your hand, you forget the cat, you forget that your mom told you to clean your room, you forget that your daughter might walk in on you.
Are you okay?
You forget all of that and you simply exist then and there. Now, this has actually been empirically linked in studies to enjoyment levels and how intuitive games feel. And it is believed that to achieve this, game designers need to create detailed, consistent, and rich environments and allow the player to create a mental representation of their game world, meaning it is important that players understand their place in the world to really sell the idea to the brain. This makes us adopt a point of view of the world, and we use that as a reference to where we are. Let me say that again. What I'm saying is that once you achieve spatial presence in a game, once you're immersed in it, your brain actively orients itself inside the game, promoting your existence inside the world to the primary reference point of where you are instead of where you physically actually are. This is actually really easy to achieve using a VR headset. That is why people freak out when they wear a headset in the mall and they play the roller coaster sequence. They know their in the mall. They know it's not real, but they freak out nonetheless. And you don't need a VR headset to achieve this state. Games with powerful environmental design can do that too. This, however, is a really fragile state to sustain. Any elements that simply don't feel right can break the spell. Anything that reminds you that this is a video game, things like floating numbers or glitches, lack of player agency or responsiveness, even HUD elements can detract from the experience. That is why a lot of games lately have been having much cleaner and fewer HUD elements. And that is why environmental design artists go through all this trouble when creating these environments. Because even if you don't actually actively think about it, you subconsciously pick up on these environmental design clues and analyze it. This actually gave rise to very cool and creative environmental design ideas, one of which is environmental storytelling or embedded narratives. See, even cutscenes can have a negative impact on your presence in a game. So one way the developers try to minimize that impact is environmental storytelling, in which the designers use the actual environment to support the main narrative of the game or subplots, or even just enrich the lore of the game. These often manifest themselves in things like notes scattered throughout the game, a sign on the wall, or even background chatter between characters. They are all ways to tell you more story without actually forcing you to go through it. You kinda pick on these as you explore the world. Hopefully by now you see how complex, exhausting, and mind-blowing is the process that our favorite game makers go through to bring these worlds to life, and we've only touched the surface of it, and hopefully that gave you more appreciation to the work. Now I want to leave you with one final example that I think makes use of all of these concepts in a masterful way. The Last of Us. I'll run you through the small subplot that you experience in-game, and I want you to look at it from an environmental design point of view. This story starts when your character, Joel, comes across the small fishing boat and finds a letter from a mysterious character, Ish, a fisherman who took refuge in nearby sewers. You soon enter the sewers, you do a little bit of exploration, and you find another letter from Ish. In fact, it turns out this is where Ish hid for a while. Deeper still in the maze-like sewers, you come upon this supply room. In it is another note. Turns out he met with a few other survivors and traded with them. Seems that Ish is also faced with this conflict of whether or not he should invite them to hide with him in the sewers. Soon, you come upon a scene that you don't expect to see in the sewers. A door to a magical kingdom of sorts. Inside, you're greeted with a homemade alarm system and a sign with ground rules. And you think to yourself, maybe Ish did invite them and they started this little community. You see a place where children could have played football. A rain catching system for water supply. And another note from Ish that mentions how they came up with the idea and how he gave the children water guns and they kept him drenched all day, and how he's not looking forward to Kyle's special meatloaf. It's soon after that the things start to look grim. You get attacked by a few infected, you fight them off, you run, and you open a door. And the first thing that catches your eye is this toy horse, and the body laying across from it next to some white rags on the floor. You approach the body, next to it is a note that reads, "We're trapped. I think everyone else is dead. Some of the little ones are with me. I got infected pounding on the door. I don't know how long we'll hold out. If Ish and the others are alive, maybe they can reach us. They have to reach us. If it comes down to it, I'll make it quick. Kyle." That's when you realize that the white rags are covering something. And on the floor a scribble that reads,